candidates that's running for office. Can you please stand? Democratic candidates running for office. And with that, I would like to ask all of the elected officials. We have aldermen and we have mayors in the audience. Can you please stand, elected officials? All elected officials, please stand. Thank you very much, and welcome to Hillcrest High School and the City of Country Club Hills. And here's your president.
Thank you, Mayor, for the city. Anyway, welcome everyone. You know, this election process is very important. It's about electing Democrats this time around. Right? Elect Democrats, right? So I want to welcome you to Bremen Township, which I'm the new Bremen Township Committeeman, and thank you guys for your support. Today we're going to get a chance to answer some great questions. We're going to get a chance to meet some great people. And I have the honor of introducing a friend of mine I've known for many, many years. I've known her husband longer, but she's nice enough. This person has been active in the Southland for many, many years, has actually made changes that have been instrumental in actually moving forward. And this is just another piece of the puzzle to actually make not only the state of Illinois great, but the Southland great. So I bring to all of you guys who all know this wonderful Congresswoman, Robin Kelly.
Thank you guys so much. And the first thing I want you to do is give yourselves a hand. We really appreciate all of you being here and the turnout. We know it's not easy getting there at 5 or 5:30, especially if you work downtown. So I just want to give a shout out and my appreciation to all of you for showing up and showing our next governor and our next lieutenant governor that we really care who's in office and what they're going to do and all of that. That we care and that we vote. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Mayor, for welcoming us to your town. When you said all the people running for office stand up, I forgot I was still running too. So my name's on the ballot in November, and also this last election I became the State Central Committee woman, so I wanted to thank all of you for your support. Duty tonight is to introduce someone I've known for a while now, someone that I respect greatly. Juliana and I worked together at the Cooker, as I call it, in her capacity. She was the Justice Advisory Committee Director or Executive Director, and I was the Chief Administrative Officer. When I was in Congress, when I ran for Congress, she was still there, and I had the opportunity to invite just one person to come and represent my district in Cook County to speak with Eric Holder, and it was Juliana that I thought about coming to represent us because she's bright, she's accomplished a lot, and you know, she's already elected. I know she'll be, I'm not trying to insult anybody, but the best lieutenant governor that we've ever had, and I look forward to her being in that position. So Juliana, welcome to the South Suburbs, and thank you for being here, and I know you will do a splendid job.
Thank you. So first of all, to Congresswoman Kelly, thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for all of your leadership. You all know what's going on in Washington, D.C., and we need people who are going to be advocates, and you are just such a strong advocate for our state and for people's rights all across the country. So thank you for being here. Well, good evening now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Juliana Stratton, and I'm so proud to be on the ticket running with J.B. Pritzker as his lieutenant governor, and so glad to be out here tonight in the South Suburbs, and here in particular in Country Club Hills. I had a lot of friends that I didn't even really know, as I was walking around the room, I made some new friends. And I thank you for all the smiles and the hugs and the handshakes and all the people, some that I do know from previous meetings. It's just always great. It feels like a family reunion. So thank you for being here tonight. And so I have been serving the public and solving problems and fighting for what's right for my entire life. And I am an attorney. For 20 years, I've had my own small business where I've worked to create a more fair workplace. And then I went on to the University of Illinois at Chicago, where I led the Center for Public Safety and Justice, working on issues on how to build trust between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. And now I'm state representative of the 5th District, which is wholly located within the city of Chicago. And I fight every single day to make my constituents proud. And I can tell you that I never really thought that I would be in this position, being a state representative running for lieutenant governor. But all of that changed in 2015. I was sitting at home watching the news, and I saw that my state representative, somebody who claimed to be a Democrat, and who was supposed to be representing my interest and those of my district, he had joined up with this Republican governor that we have in some ways that I just couldn't sit by the sidelines. First of all, he joined up with this governor to cut services to families that needed, low-income families that needed child care assistance, and slash that program so that parents who needed to go to work or go to school, but they needed child care assistance, they no longer had that program. And you know we need our children to get off to the best start possible, right? Yes. And then this same person who was supposed to be representing me joined up with this governor, even though he said he was a Democrat, he was supposed to be representing my interests, to cut services to seniors who needed home health care services so that they would not be forced to go into a nursing facility. So I'm watching the news and I'm thinking, this person is cutting services to two groups that are very close to my heart. Because at the time that I'm watching this story, I was also the primary caregiver for my mother, who had Alzheimer's. And I thought about what kind of person would cut services to children and seniors. And I couldn't just sit by and watch that happen. So I stepped up after first thinking to myself, somebody should run against him. I wasn't thinking it was me. But guess what? Just like we see for so many people, many of you here in this room, when you get to a place and you say, you know what, I can't sit by and just watch this happen anymore. And I decided to run for office. Some of you might not have decided to run for office. Some of you did. But you got involved because you saw something happening. You started making phone calls. You started knocking on doors. You started calling your friends, getting involved in organizations, because we realized as Democrats that that's the only way that we're going to bring change to the things that are not fair and are unjust in our communities. So I ran for state representative. I haven't been in Springfield very long, but guess what? I've been there long enough. I've been there long enough to know that we cannot afford another 4 years of Governor Rounder's failed leadership. We just simply can't afford it. Everything that we care about and all the issues that we as Democrats have been fighting for, we have somebody there that's trying to destroy those things. And so JB and I have been traveling around the state, and we've been meeting in rooms just like this all around the state of Illinois, and we have a fantastic state. Because one of the things that I realized is this governor that we currently have doesn't listen. Doesn't listen. And that's exactly what JB has been doing as we travel the state. Gathering people together and listening to the people of the communities. Here's the thing. The solutions to our communities, they're not found because you have two people in the governor and lieutenant governor's office. It's not even about the General Assembly. What JB and I have found is that the wisdom is found in rooms just like this. You know your communities. You have the ideas. You have the energy. We just have to listen to the wisdom found in the room. You know what's best for your communities. But you need a governor who's going to listen and pay attention to those issues and then work as a partner to all of you to make sure that these things happen. And that's what you'll get from J.B. Pritzker. So here's the deal. We've heard the issues about the need for health care. This governor doesn't listen to that. We've heard the need for education, quality education for all children. This governor has not been a strong advocate for education for all children and making sure we fix that. We've heard that communities that have been forgotten, communities that have suffered decades of disinvestment, that need economic growth and opportunity. This is not the governor who has listened to the communities who say we want strong small businesses and we want to make sure that we can have economic growth. So these are the things that we've been talking about. I know we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions to get into more details tonight. But I can tell you that the main thing that we have to do is we have to defeat Bruce Rauner on November 6th. And it's going to take every one of you in this room to help us do that. And not just to win the governor's seat. We need to win and get Democrats elected up and down the ticket. Because for the big things that J.B. Pritzker wants to get done, it's going to require Democrats all across this state. So I look forward to hearing your questions tonight. We look forward to having a discussion. And if I haven't had a chance to meet you already, I definitely look forward to having the opportunity to do so. It's now my distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you the next governor of the state of Illinois, who knows how to turn this state around and will do exactly that, J.B. Pritzker.
Thank you. You can see why she is going to be the best lieutenant governor we've ever had. Thank you very much, Julianne. She did not tell you, by the way, that she didn't just win that race for state representative against Bruce Rauner's candidate. She beat him by 30 points. Let's go do that again in November, shall we? So, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to Congressman Robin Kelly for your amazing work in Congresswoman, I know you. Thank you, Congresswoman. Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who does amazing work in Washington, D.C., and especially for what you do on behalf of the fight for gun safety. Thank you. Mayor Ford, Mayor Ellsbury, thank you very much for inviting us, for hosting this, helping to put this together. I also want to thank the other public servants that are in the room, the police officers that are here. Thank you for your service to protect and serve. Thank you to Debbie Stern, a school board member in the room. Thank you to Dr. Renee Sims, the principal. Where are you, Dr. Sims? You came in. There you are. Thank you very much. And to Governor's State Universities, Elaine Mayman. Thank you. Now, I guess I ought to begin a little by taking a step backward and telling you why I'm running for governor in the first place. I decided to run for governor because everything that we care about, and I really mean everything, is under siege right now. It's under siege by a racist, misogynist, homophobic, xenophobic, a couple other adjectives I'd like to add, president in Washington, D.C., and his local silent partner, Governor Bruce Rauner. My wife and I, like many of you, went to sleep on November 6th thinking things were going to be okay, maybe, and woke up early on November 7th finding We got a lot of work to do. And after 2 days in a fetal position, we finally came out of it, looked at each other and said, now we got to fight even harder. Now there are a lot of things that drove me to end up running for governor, but the most important one is what my parents taught me. It's the values of fighting for social and economic justice, for equality and inclusion. That's what I learned growing up in my household. My parents taught us that, my faith taught us that, and so it probably isn't surprising to you that in an effort to carry that out during the course of my life, I've tried to go do big things that I thought would make a difference in people's lives all across the state of Illinois and across the country. So for more than 20 years, I've been a national advocate in early childhood education to make sure that we have quality preschool and quality childcare for every child. Every child. And I led the building of a museum that teaches more than 60,000 school children every single year across the state of Illinois to fight bigotry and hatred and intolerance, and 60,000 adults too. And we've spread it throughout schools across the state. And to make sure and expand a program that President Obama put in place called No Kid Hungry, so that every child in a low-income school district across the state of Illinois, in fact 230,000 kids, would get school breakfast. And I founded a small business incubator in Chicago that now is the #1 small business incubator in the entire world, creating 7,000 jobs and hundreds of companies, something that we can do all across the state of Illinois. But all of those things that I tell you about in my past are just an effort to try to tell you something important, which is, I think it's important that you have a governor who actually knows how to get things done. Today, we have a governor who for 2 years and 6 days was unwilling to agree to a state budget. It's the fundamental job of a governor. It's the first thing you're supposed to do. A budget is the expression of what your values are. He apparently has no values because he didn't put forward a budget. The man couldn't get anything passed. He was unwilling to sit in the room. I don't care if you don't like the other people in the room that you have to negotiate with. You have to walk into that room and get something done for the people of the state of Illinois. And then after 2 years and 6 days, which I will remind you is the longest period of any state in the entire United States, in the history of the United States, to go without a budget. That's the longest period any state's ever gone. After that, what happened? They passed a budget in Springfield, the legislature, with enough votes because the Republicans decided in the legislature to give up on the governor and go work with the Democrats themselves to have a veto-proof majority, and then they overrode his veto. So this is a governor who for 3 years straight was unwilling to get a budget done. We managed to have a third year of his governorship with a budget, but not because of him. Because a few good Republicans were willing to work together with Democrats to get a budget. Now we have a budget here in his 4th year, but only because the man is now playing politics. He would like to get reelected, and he has nothing to show for 3.5 years in office. Nothing. So what does he do? He signs the budget that the legislature presents him, and remember how much he complained about that tax increase? He spent all of it. Just so you know, the tax increase that he complained about. The truth of the matter is, we got a lot of work to do in this state, and this governor isn't willing to do any of it. I will. Now, I believe that we need to basically, fundamentally change the tax system in the state. I think your property taxes are too high. We have to lower your property taxes, but let's remind ourselves why property taxes are too high here and everywhere in the state. It's because Illinois is 49th out of 50 states in the United States, 49th in state funding for education. 49th, so about 26% of funding for education comes from the state. Just to give you a sense, the average state in the United States, about half the money comes from the state. Where does the rest of the money come from in Illinois? Local property taxes. In the other states, same thing, except we're at 70%. In other states, it's 46 or so percent. We got to change the system here. So how are we going to do that? I think that we ought to ask the wealthiest people in the state of Illinois to pay more and lower property taxes and income taxes for people in the middle class and those striving to get there. We need a fair tax system in this state, a progressive income tax system. And I'm advocating that, and I hope you'll stand with me to get that done. It will help us pay for schools, and boy, do we need to improve our schools. All of us know that we've got to lower the local property tax, but you wonder why people get up and leave the state. One of the reasons is local property taxes. And oh, by the way, in the poorest neighborhoods and in middle-class neighborhoods, property tax rates are the highest as compared to wealthy neighborhoods where the rates are the lowest. That's why we've got to fundamentally change this system. We've got to invest the money that we get from a progressive income tax system in schools. Now, there's a budget that increases the funding for schools under mandate by $350 million each year. That's not enough. It's not enough. We've got to make sure, particularly in the lowest income school districts, that we are standing up for those kids and making sure they get a quality education. Every child, no matter the color of their skin, no matter the income level of their parents, no matter the zip code that they live in, deserves a quality education. I don't care where they live in the state. I also believe that every person should have a doctor. Every person deserves health care. That it is a right, not a privilege. And so I put forward a plan that doesn't wait for the federal government to step in. It doesn't wait for the years that it might take to have a state single-payer system, which we might all advocate for. It starts right away in January of 2019 when you get a new governor. And you know what it is? It's called the public option. Some of you may remember, this is the plan that President Obama proposed when he put forward the Affordable Care Act, but he couldn't get that part passed. He didn't have enough votes for it in the Congress. What does it do? It allows people to access the state's healthcare system. Instead of waiting for a universal system like Medicare for All from the federal government, we can allow people to access the state's healthcare system at a much lower cost, much lower because it takes the profit out of it and all that health insurance premium profit that goes to insurance companies. It allows people to get that for thousands of dollars less. And for people who are not covered by Medicaid, it is a vastly more affordable way to get health care. We're going to start right away moving toward universal health care. Now, we have questions I know that the mayor's got, but I want to just say one last thing. None of the education system that we put in place is really enough unless we're creating jobs. When you go all the way through the K-12 system, and oh, by the way, we need to bring back career technical education and vocational training. So if you graduate and you don't want to go to college, you can get a job that's a head of household wage job. And for kids who want to go to college, we're going to make it more affordable for them. And make sure you don't get strapped with debt for the rest of their life. But all of that is all leading toward a job. We've got to create jobs in the state, except for one thing. There are two basically big job creators in the state. One is small businesses. That's actually 2/3 of all the jobs that get created are small businesses. People who are willing to take a risk and start something in their neighborhood and build it. That's 2/3 of all the jobs. We need to help people who take that risk. We need to have a state small business loan fund and a micro loan fund and technical assistance and mentorship for people who are willing to take that risk so we can grow jobs. But there's another way to create jobs, and that's to attract big businesses to the state. But we have a governor today who everywhere he goes, he badmouths the state of Illinois. Everywhere he goes. Not only that, but he invites governors from surrounding states to go on TV and badmouth the state of Illinois. And then he goes abroad to foreign lands on trade missions where you're supposed to be attracting companies to the state so that they'll employ people here, and he badmouths the state of Illinois when he goes on those trips. Now, I know something that apparently he doesn't know. We have a lot of virtues to talk about in the state of Illinois. We have the best educated, most dedicated workforce in the entire nation. We've got to invest in it, though. We have to invest in Governor's State. We have to invest in our community colleges and our universities in the state. Something the governor doesn't understand and is cut funding for. I'll be your best chief marketing officer for this state, I promise you. I'm going to say one last thing about the election that's coming up. You know, Governor Rauner has a 30% approval rating. You may have seen that in the newspaper. That seems like a high estimate to me. But other people think that he's going to be easy to beat as a result of only having a 30% approval rating. Not true. There was another guy with a 30% approval rating in 2016 running for president, and he won. And Bruce Rauner is going to try to win using the same tactics that, I don't even want to say the man's name, 45. That 45 used. And that's trash the Democrats. That's what he's going to do. It's trash the Democrats. We've seen Rauner do it for 3.5 years. Trash the Democrats up and down the ticket. He's doing it again this year. He's going to keep doing it because he has nothing good to say. We're not going to let him win doing it. We're not going to let him win. And in fact, we're going to work hard to win up and down the ticket. We're going to make sure that we're working together, all of us. And that means action for a better tomorrow. It means indivisibles. It means progressive groups. It means Democratic Party. It means all of us pulling together because this may be the most important election in the history of Illinois and the nation. Why do I say that? We've got to stop Donald Trump. And we've got to get rid of Bruce Rauner. Now, I put forward a vision for the state that I believe in. But I also know that if we do not elect more Democrats to join Robin Kelly in Washington, to take the House of Representatives, then we cannot stop Donald Trump. We can, if we all get out and work for it, volunteer and vote, everybody in this room. Make sure you ask your neighbors and your friends to get out and vote too. It's not going to be an easy election, it just isn't. It's going to be a fight. But I ask you, are you ready for a fight? I mean, are you ready for a fight, everybody? Let's go get them. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming today. Happy to answer any questions. You want me to stay up here, Mr. Mayor? I know you've got some questions for Juliana also, so.
Okay, we have questions. The first question is, what does your administration, you spoke this a little bit, what does your administration plan to do to address the high taxes in the Southland residents are paying?
Yeah, I'm going to just briefly say, you know, the number one thing we can do for property taxes all across the state of Illinois, of course, is a progressive income tax and making sure that we're purposefully working to lower property tax. I want to remind you one thing. Governor Bruce Rauner says on TV and other places that he wants a property tax freeze. Now, that might be okay, except for one thing. He isn't telling you how he's going to pay for schools. You have to talk about how you'll pay for schools before you can talk about what you're going to do about property taxes, because that's the predominant portion of property taxes. And the reason they're so high here is because property values are lower and they need to tax you at a much higher rate in order to pay for schools. That's not right. That's not right. That's why you've got to talk about not just a property tax freeze, but where's the money going to come from to pay for our schools? And I've talked about that. He wants to criticize me for that. Well, you know what? He says I'm going to raise everybody's tax. I am not. I am trying to protect the middle class and those striving to get there by lowering taxes for them and asking Bruce Rauner and me to pay a higher tax rate.
JB, they want to know, do you support the Southland Airport, and what's your views on it?
We have not only to work on a Southland Airport, but economic development projects in the Southland. I mean, you have become Forgatonia here. And you know, because many of you know me because I've been here often. I have. And as Juliana said, we have been listening. And we have heard over and over and over again about what's happened here, about Lincoln Mall, about so many opportunities that have just gone away because people come down here, ask you for your votes, they get elected, and then they forget. I won't forget. And I can tell you, not only will Mayor Alsbury and Mayor Ford remind me, but one of my idols in the Congress, Robin Kelly, will continually remind me that it is my job, it is our job to make sure that we are investing in economic development projects, the creation of small businesses. Job creation is the most important thing we can do here. Most important thing.
What plans do you have to create employment opportunities and restore the vibrant economics of the South Suburbs?
Maybe that's the same answer. I'll just say what I just said and more so.
Well, you know, I'm just reading the questions. I'm just a moderator. The tax base for the South Suburbs is shrinking. The stores and shops leave. Do you have plans to reverse the shrinkage through the use of TIF funds or other monies and to encourage entrepreneurship?
So TIF funds, I think, is the crux of that question. And so first thing I tell you is, I do not think TIFs have been used wisely over the years. That stakeholders in communities have not been invited to the table or not involved in the decision making around TIFs. And do I think that we should have economic development dollars? Do I think that we should be asking ourselves, you know, how do we invest dollars so that we can have a vibrant economic future for the Southland? Of course we should. And should TIFs be on the table? Of course, but you can't just have a small group of people making a decision that it seems to me ought to have all the stakeholders, including teachers, at the table helping to make those decisions. But I want to be clear that I recognize that we've got to bring resources to the Southland. This doesn't just happen all by itself. That you actually have to have leadership in Springfield, and you've got to have leadership in Cook County, and you've got to have leadership locally that believes in investing for the long haul, because this is not a short-term problem. It didn't get created in the short term. It got created over a long period of time, so it takes long-term investment, reinvestment, to bring back jobs and economic development here.
JB, the South Suburbs lacks a level 1 trauma center. How will you address, your administration address this issue and broader issues concerning healthcare inequality?
I know you've got questions for Juliana, so I don't want to steal all the questions, but I'm not avoiding that one. I just want to make sure. Yeah, you're like one trauma center. So the first thing I tell you is, what's happened under Bruce Rauner is that healthcare dollars have gone away from the areas that need them most. What they've done is, because of the cuts in state government, because there was no budget for 2 years, interesting side note, no budget for 2 years made Bruce Rauner the biggest deficit spender in the history of the state of Illinois. Because he's unwilling to pay for anything. He doesn't want to tell you how he's going to pay for anything. So, big deficit spender seems like, well, gee, there must have been a lot of money being invested in healthcare. No. It means that safety net hospitals are going away. It means that where those mental health services, substance abuse treatment centers were, they've been diminished or gone away. Healthcare across the board in the communities, and I really mean not just here, but go south of I-80. People had to drive 45 minutes to get to a place that would serve them before. Now often they're driving 2 hours to get somewhere. And now think about if you needed substance abuse treatment. That isn't something that you can commute to 2 hours a day. Or mental health services. So that's the problem that's occurred all over the state, and it's happened right here too, where the diminished services have meant that people can't access the health care that they need. A level 1 trauma center, we've got to find a way to invest in, we've got to make sure that we're investing in hospitals, especially safety net hospitals, to make sure that we are, in fact, having level 1 trauma centers available for everybody, no matter where they live across the state of Illinois. You can't live without one. You literally can't live without one.
Can you hear me? Talk loud. There you go. How does your administration plans to address the school funding issue, inequalities impacting the schools in the Southland?
So the question of education and education funding has been one of the issues that I think as we travel the state, we hear more about than almost any, I mean, there's several issues, but education is definitely one of the top 3 issues that we hear about. And JB has already talked about the need to pass a progressive income tax structure so that we can make sure that there is fairness in our tax system, unlike what we currently see. Right now, Illinois, I believe, is second to last in our funding formula for education. So when we think about how much money comes from the state and how much should come from the state, we're putting in about 26% from the state, when really it should be closer to 50%, and hence that's why we have such an over-reliance on property taxes. And so to be able to address that, we have to pass a progressive income tax. So that's something we've already talked about. But the other thing that we need to talk about is we have to talk about what the impact of this, what I call a manufactured budget crisis over the last several years has done. Because these were cuts to things that we know are so important for all of our children, such as early childhood education. JB has been a national leader on early childhood education for over 20 years. I was a fellow with the Erickson Institute on early childhood education. And we know that when we invest in our youngest children and get them off to the best start, and as JB likes to say, not just preschool, but 0 to 3 as well. But when we get our children off to the best start, they are much more likely to be successful as they go forward. I, in fact, this past year, had a bill that I sponsored and got signed into law in the General Assembly to end preschool expulsion. Did you know preschoolers get expelled? And they disproportionately, the expulsions disproportionately impacted black and brown boys in particular, and increasingly girls. And so the idea that being expelled from preschool means you're much more likely to be to drop out of high school. So we have to keep our children and make sure that they have the supports that they need very young. This governor made cuts to programs that would help children get off to their best start. We can't accept that. We then look at K through 12 and we talked about the funding, and yes, we did have some good progress made with Senator Menard's bill for the education funding reform, which, by the way, as it first was passed, Governor Rauner vetoed SB1. So that was a good start, but it simply wasn't enough. So we have to get the progressive income tax. And the last thing I'll say about education, and JB touched on it with the need for vocational, but also what has happened to our higher education system under this governor. It is a travesty. It is a travesty that we have over 72,000 young people leaving our state to go elsewhere because they can't count on any kind of stability in our education system. Faculty and administration, professors who bring such richness to these institutions, deciding I need to look elsewhere because under this governor we don't know what's going to happen and whether these universities are going to be able to keep their doors open. Students, low-income students who rely upon MAP grants to go to college, who need assistance, and those being stopped when the governor had this manufactured budget crisis. What happens when we don't have an education system that people can count on? It's what we see now. It's what we see. And by the way, yes, we were able to get that budget passed with the help of Republicans last year. And yes, we got a budget passed this year. If anybody thinks that just by getting a budget signed that everything just pops right back into place, it doesn't happen like this. The damage, the legacy of the damage that Bruce Rauner has caused is going to last a long time. Again, we can't afford another 4 years of Bruce Rauner.
Gianna, can you speak a little bit about gun violence and what do you guys look at as far as
Sure. So gun violence and restorative justice. So I'm a restorative justice practitioner and a trained peace circle keeper. I alluded to that a little bit earlier when I talked about the idea of the wisdom being in the room, but really much of it is based upon the fact that we are disconnected one to another. A lot of the violence that we see a couple of things. First of all, we see access, too many guns flowing in the streets, and we need common sense gun legislation. And we've tried to pass that. Whether it's a ban on assault weapons or bump stock ban or the gun dealer licensing, all things that we have been working on in Springfield that Governor Rauner does not support. And the gun licensing, dealer licensing bill, which he vetoed, all of these things we see happening. So yes, we have to stop that, but from a restorative justice standpoint, we also have to recognize that when we have communities that have been disinvested in for decades, and we don't see the kinds of things that make a healthy community, then that's when you see a lot of unhealthy behaviors. Let me give you an example. When you don't see mental health services being readily available in communities, but people still need mental health services, then that's a problem. When you don't see jobs and opportunity, then where are people turning to? So we have to do what we can to make sure that for forgotten communities, communities that have been overlooked, communities that have been disinvested in, that we focus on those communities and really shine a light on those communities and figure out how to build up and strengthen those communities. We have to also look at violence as a public health issue. Just like as we hear from Cure Violence and others, that it's an epidemic that continues to spread if we don't stop that disease. And so today, JB and I were with a group of young people from Parkland. And the young people have made it very clear. They have called. And we have to recognize as adults that a lot of times we haven't been listening to these young people who are saying, we want to see an end, and this is to the gun violence, and this is what we want to see happen. So they're lifting up their voices. We have to listen to young people. We have to do what we can to get guns off, illegal guns off the street, and make sure that we are doing what we can to intercept that. We have to make sure that there's mental health services, and we have to make sure that as people, a lot of the work that I've done has been in the area of criminal justice reform. And we know that we've had an issue of mass incarceration in this country. And so, as people go through this system, we have to make sure that when people come out of the system, and by the way, most do, that there's opportunity for people who are returning to their communities as well. That there's job opportunities, educational opportunities, opportunities to have access to health care. Healthy communities require that we have healthy relationships with the systems in our communities. And right now, a lot of the violence is because we're disconnected, we don't see each other, we don't connect to one another, and therefore we don't understand, we don't see the problem with harming one another. And we have to do what we can through government to make sure we can repair that harm.
I just want to add one more thing, if I will. 7 months from now, I will sign the gun dealer licensing bill. And a bump stock ban, and it's so bad. Yes, I'll let Juliana bat clean up here. That's okay. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for spending your time. It's an evening, a weekday evening. You all come from work or from home with other duties and responsibilities to spend your time here, to be engaged in the political and electoral process, to stand up for issues that matter to you. I especially want to thank all of you who every single day think about how to make this world a better place. We have so much work to do, all of us, even if it's just voting and asking your neighbors to vote. We have so much work to do. You see it every day. I turn on the television and I watch this president and this governor. They are acting in ways that I almost cannot fathom would happen in this great country. So we have to take it back. And we're counting on you, and we promise you that if you'll elect us, we'll work our butts off for you.
Also, thank you all for this opportunity to be here. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to echo what JB has said, and that is, we're just so appreciative of the opportunity to share just a tidbit of what we've been talking about. If you go to our website, jbpritzker.com, you will find plans for a number of different issues. We couldn't get into all of them tonight, but everything from criminal justice reform to veterans to early childhood education, there's about 15 or 16 plans. We are working hard to get all around the state. We want to make sure that there's, just like during our primary, there was no county that was left untouched. We have people working in all of the different areas of the state. And the thing that we recognize is that it's going to take every single one of us. This is something we cannot take for granted. I'll close with an African proverb that I often quote that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. Together with each and every one of you, because there's so much that we want to do for our state. And by the way, this is not just about we want to beat Bruce Rauner, but we do. Just to be clear, we do. And it is about lifting up the things that we care about. And we care about people as Democrats. We care about people. And it's not just us in this room, it's the next generation and the generation after that. We have to leave this state in a better place than we have it right now. And we can only do that by working together.
Before we leave, one of the people elected that's here, so I'm elected, and candidates, please come forward with a picture with JB and Representative Stratton. And I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Showed a good showing for the Southland. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you so very much.
I'd appreciate if you would not record.
You don't want me recording in public?
Right, like right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.